Welcome back to my top 100 board games list. We are in the last of the first half, the last set of 10 of the bottom 50 of my top 100, and we are covering games that are themed this time around card-based gameplay. As I checked, and I believe all of these 10 games have cards as a use, and some of them are prominent enough that I would just call them straight up card games. So that's our theme for today. Let's get started. My number 60 is Cash and Guns 2nd Edition, which is down 7 spots on my list. Its weight is about a 2 and will play between 4 and 8 players. So, Cash and Guns is a game in which it's a party game, and what you are doing is you are essentially all taking these foam guns, so it is highly appropriate for children, as you can imagine, and pointing them at each other to threaten people into either ducking out of cowardice or standing up and potentially getting shot, depending on whether you play a card that bluffs that you're shooting or one that actually goes off and will hit someone if they haven't, run for their lives. Basically, any people who haven't either got shot or ran for their lives get to divvy up the loot, which you get to see ahead of time, in an order that goes starting from the Godfather and going clockwise around the table. The Godfather can also change. That can be one of the things you take, is instead of part of the loot is taking the role of the Godfather for the subsequent round. And basically, it's a game that sort of balances itself by virtue of the people that seem to be doing well are just going to get a lot more guns pointed at them, and the people that are doing poorly will probably get ignored in later rounds. So it tends to balance out, unless you just have someone at the table who has the kind of personality where they just tend to get targeted. That can happen. I'm not saying I'm that person. I'm also not saying I'm that person. It's a fun party game, but it is maybe just a little bit more complex than a party game that would be suitable for absolutely everyone. You do kind of have to pick your audience here. You usually want to play this with people who are a little bit more savvy with games, so maybe not necessarily elderly or just people who don't play any kind of video games or any other kind of gaming at all. That's not to say it's complex, it's just that there are more steps here than in some other dirt simple party games that you might want to choose for such an occasion. But it is a lot of fun. The theme of just being gangsters who are backstabbing and screwing each other over is a lot of fun. And it does come out here more strongly than you might expect for a party game. So that is my number 60, Cash and Guns. My number 59 is La Granja, which is down 7 spots on my list. Its weight is about an 8, so fairly heavy, and will play 1 to 4 players, so it is a solo game. La Granja is, in a lot of ways, a game that has a lot of sort of standard Euro gaming elements in it. There's a lot of things that are done in ways that are not that surprising if you've played a lot of other similar games, but what sort of drives this one is multi-use cards, which have essentially 4 different things, depending on whether you look in the top, bottom, left, or right of a card, that they can be used for. And depending on which side you want to use, you tuck it under a certain portion of your player board and it does something different. So it creates these really interesting decisions of A, which cards do you want to play, and B, which part of the card do you want to use for what? Like, how do you balance the different possibilities of what you can do? Because by virtue of choosing one of those 4 sides, you are choosing not to use the other 3 sides that you could potentially gain things that could help you. So it's a lot about like saying, do I really need this special power, or do I just really need to up my money value with this card? What is it that I need to actually get done? It also plays over the course of, I believe, 6 rounds, and it's a game that accelerates nicely, where at the beginning you are feeling like you can't get a heck of a lot done, and towards the end you're accomplishing a whole lot more. There's just little neat bits and pieces on how this functions all over the place. And neat is probably the word I would choose to describe this. There's a lot to like about this. And there's not really one part of it that I absolutely adore, which is probably why it lands on my list in the 50s. So it's a very strong game, and I would happily recommend it to people who are willing to take on a little bit more involved with the game. I've played it online once or twice, and it seems to work well there. That was on Board Game Arena. It's a solid game. It's just not going to be the first Euro I reach for if given the choice, unless I really want to play a game with multi-use cards. If I want that, then I might pull this one out. But it's still a strong game that deserves a place in my collection, and that is my number 59, La Granja. My number 58 is Jamaica, and Jamaica is down 7 spots from my previous list. Its weight is about a 3, and it plays 3 to 6 players. It says 2 on the box. Don't listen to them. You probably would prefer to play it at 4 to 6 if possible. 3 might be a little low, but it's still playable. Jamaica is a game about pirates racing around an island, blowing each other up, and collecting gold along the way. It is a very easy sell thematically, and the theme does come through. What you are doing in the game is picking these cards, and the cards will give you different actions. They will be collect gold, collect food, which you need to feed your pirates in order to not start going backwards around the island, because starving pirates will just go where they can to get food. You will collect gunpowder for fighting other people, and you will move. And you roll 2 dice, 6-sided dice, and say you roll a 2 and a 5. You decide to put 2 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. That means you'll do the action that's on the morning part of the card twice, whichever of the 3 cards in your hand you choose, and the one that's on the evening part of your card 5 times. And so you've got to pick according to that, and it's the captain each turn who picks which order the 2 dice that they roll go in. It's pretty straightforward. You can teach this to most people. This is a great family weight game. This is a great game to teach kids because they're likely going to be attracted to the theme more often than not, and if they are not, well, then you should probably get them to a child psychologist, because what kind of normal functioning child would not love pirates? So that aside, also works with adults. It's not a kid's game per se. It's more of a family game. And it just looks attractive. The art and the production design of it is very high quality. I also don't think it's particularly expensive, and I believe you can still get this game. So those are both pluses here. It's just one of my go-to games when I'm trying to teach people who know nothing about games a game that they're going to have fun with. Because I don't need to take forever to explain it to them. It's maybe a little bit more complicated than some of the other possible games that I could teach them. So it's not the game I pick if I know I need something dead simple. But other than that, it's usually a good game to get people into. And I think sometimes you want like just a little bit of complexity, like you can find in this game, because that prepares people a little bit better for future games down the road if they know, oh, okay, so this is not just something at the level of a Sorry or a Candyland or something like that, where it's just dead simple, flip a card, roll a die, and just move that number of spaces and do something if it says to do it on the square you land on. Introducing people to games that are a little bit something more is part of what you want to do, and I think this is a great bridge into games like that, because it keeps it relatively simple and elegant while still having more going on than just a flip of a card or a roll of die. So that is my number 58, Jamaica. Check it out. My number 57 is Century Spice Road, which is down 18 spots on my list, so it's fallen a bit. Its weight is about a 2 and plays 2 to 5 players. This is another game, like Jamaica, that I often use with people who are relatively new to games. I probably use it even more often than Jamaica, because despite the fact that it is not as thematic, in fact, it was completely rethemed to a golem theme, which is a prettier version of the game, but this is just the one that I happen to have. If you want to get one, you should probably get the golem version, because that one just is more attractive, and so it's probably going to draw people in. But despite the fact that this one isn't particularly thematic, the gameplay is just so streamlined and fast, and it just works so well all the time. I might worry about Jamaica breaking down if some people are just like really slow at picking their cards, which shouldn't happen, because in Jamaica you're only picking between 3 cards in your hand. But it still can happen. Whereas this one, unless someone is just purposefully trying to drag down the game, this one should zip along quite quickly. And so that sort of accelerated pace, and the fact that I think there's a fairly deep game here, despite the fact that there's not a lot of rules, means that this one just really introduces quality gameplay to people in a very accessible package. So that's the reason why this is probably one of the games that I've used most often with people who are relatively new to games. When I was working at a board game cafe, I would use this one like at least once or twice a week to introduce to people who needed to be taught a game, and they weren't giving me too much indication of what kind of game they wanted to play, other than they just wanted to try something new. I would often go to this one because it just tends to work. So this is a game that I tend to play when I'm in situations where I know I need to introduce something reliable to other people that they're going to have a good time with. And it's just a game where you are taking cards and you are using those cards to get cubes, and then using other cards to trade in other cubes for other cubes, and then eventually cash in a combination of cubes for points cards. And you're trying to do this in such a way that you race to a higher number of points than other players. That's essentially all that is going on here. But the strategy of like which cards do you need to take to do this, when can you afford to sort of waste time, how do you maximize the efficiency of how to make the combinations of cards in your hand give the best results. That's all very intriguing stuff to play around with, and it also presents itself without needing to have played the game more than once to new players. I find like people sort of grasp the depth of the game at least a little bit, even on a first playthrough. So that's a great feature to have in a game that I would use as a gateway game. This is on my list instead of Splendor because I like this better than Splendor. They both do a sort of similar engine building, simple game kind of thing here, getting colors for other colors and combinations for other combinations, and getting better as you go along in the game. With theoretically fast turns, but I think this one's more reliably fast and more reliably deep than Splendor is. So it's the reason why I own this one and not Splendor. But if you need another game in sort of this category to try, Splendor is definitely the more popular game. This is just the one I use instead. So that is my number 57, Century Spice Road, also known as a Century Golem Edition if you're looking for that one. Prettier, so try that one if you need one of them. My number 56 is Among the Stars, which is down 4 spots, so about the same place. Weight is about a 4 and plays 2 to 4 players, although I've mainly played this at 3 or 4 players. Among the Stars is a drafting game, and a straight-up card drafting game without that much else going on. There's no real board other than a score tracker to care about. And it is a game in which you are building a space station. And in building this space station, you have to consider not only what cards you need, but how you're going to place them and how these cards are going to be placed in relation to each other. Because how those cards are placed in relation to each other can affect your score both positively and negatively. Some cards benefit from being together, some cards benefit from being far apart, and it's up to you to try to arrange things and manage your resources in such a way that that's going to work for you. There's also a money element to the game where you can never quite pay for everything you want, so it's a big decision as to when you decide to just try to scrounge up some more cash, and when you want to go ahead and forge ahead with paying for a card that you really want to put in a certain spot. There's a lot to like here. I think the fact that it's just a little bit more going on in terms of more to track with the spatial element means that I have another card drafting game that is my go-to game in that category that will be coming up on my list a lot higher up. But I still really like this one, and this is sort of my B game in that category. So it's the one I go to when I'm tired of the other one. It's a high quality game. I have a couple of expansions for it, which I haven't explored as much as I would have liked. But they seem to be pretty good as well. I can't remember off the top of my head all of the stuff that was introduced in them, but I seem to remember liking the elements and thinking, if I played this more regularly, I think these would be really rewarding to have as a regular part of my game. But we haven't gotten this game out as much, and COVID hitting has kind of decimated that anyway, so our chances to play it have been less. I really like it. I feel like I haven't given this game as much time to play, especially within the expansions that I haven't touched as much as I should have. But it's still a game that I think is going to stay in my collection because I could definitely use a second game that's a drafting game that I will actually want to play. So, that is my number 56, Among the Stars. Yeah, give it a try. My number 55 is Pandemic Legacy Season 1. So, Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is a game I enjoy a lot more than Vanilla Pandemic, which is not a game that is going to be on my list. With Season 1, there are things introduced that really spice up the game for me. One is a plot. There is an ongoing storyline that you're paying attention to. Another one is the fact that it's a legacy game, so you get rid of components that you don't need anymore. We haven't had the heart to completely rip them up, so what we've been doing is just keeping them in a separate sort of garbage Ziploc bag that we're not going to be using again. But we just keep it because why rip up something you pay for, I guess. And then there's just the fact that as the game progresses, you unlock different boxes which add new elements to the game, which add things to the instruction manual that expand the game. So it's like a game that expands itself over time, and that's really neat. And I like that formula and the fact that there are surprises and there are goodies to unlock, despite the fact that we haven't got quite halfway through this and we've been stopped for a while. I decided to put this on my list because it has been one of the better positive experiences I've had in gaming, so I feel it belongs on this list. But I think I was leaving it off for a while because this is new to my list. It wasn't on my list last time. By the way, its weight is about a 6, which is more than the original Pandemic, and it plays 2 to 4 players. Although I think you could theoretically play it solo if you wanted to as well. The thing about the legacy aspect is I don't really want to try to play this without the 2 other players that I was playing with it already. So I'm a little reluctant to continue playing it because I can't play with the 3rd player. I might consider playing it with just my wife, but that would have to be a decision we make, and this is my cat monkey. Anyways, so that is Pandemic Legacy Season 2. I'm going to get my cat out of here. Pandemic Legacy Season 2. Beloved by cats, I guess. My cat's name is Monkey, and I think he just wanted cuddles. He really doesn't want to let me record right now. Oh boy. Was me recording offending you, Monkey? My number 54 is Great Western Trail, which is down 18 spots. Its weight is about an 8 and plays 2 to 4 players. Great Western Trail is a game about very attractive looking guys from the 19th century. Yeah. Ooh, very nice. And you're rustling up cattle. But really what you're doing in the game is you're essentially going along a path, and you can go one direction but not the other way, because you can skip a spot, but then you're going to have to restart the whole path over again if you ever want to go to that spot you skipped. And what happens is as you play the game, you add more and more spots to the board, which can give you more things to do, but it can also mean that you have to start paying other players for passing that place. So there's this interesting sort of money transfer, and then there's also a deck building element, which is how I tend to like my deck builders, where it's an element rather than the main thing about the game. And in here, you're just trying to rustle up as many different kinds of cattle as possible, potentially buy better cattle, and getting paid more amounts of money to turn in better and better cattle at the end of your round. There's a lot going on here. There's several tracks to monitor. There's the main board that you gotta sort of manage a map on. It's really difficult to try to explain all of this, but this is just a game that works for a lot of people. Again, I'm probably in the minority in not liking this as much as most people who tend to be heavily into Euro games, as this is really, really popular, and I just think it's pretty great instead of the absolute bee's knees. I like the theme. It's fairly well integrated here, I find. It doesn't feel completely abstract the way some games might. And it's just a game that I think is easy to recommend. It's a game that my brother, who tends to be a little bit more reluctant to play Euros, really enjoyed. And I was a little surprised that he liked it as much as he did. So it's a game I'm going to keep around for a while, I think, and I'm going to try to continue to play. I don't know if I'm going to ever try to upgrade to the newer, fancier versions that can potentially combine with each other. I'm not quite sure what the plan is with those. But yeah, that is my number 54, Great Western Trail. My number 53 is Arcadia Quest, which is up 7 spots on my list, is a weight of about a 6, and will play 2 to 4 players. Arcadia Quest is maybe what you might call a light dungeon crawling game. You are running around and you're attacking monsters. You're also attacking each other, unlike a lot of dungeon crawlers, where it's like everyone against the game or everyone against a single player who's playing against the rest of them. No, in this one, you are definitely competing with each other, and you're just trying to get as much gold. You're trying to get certain missions accomplished, and there's also a campaign element where as you complete things and unlock certain things, you can do different scenarios, and the scenarios you pick can be different for each run through the campaign. I believe it's about 6 games long, the campaign, and I think there's like between 9 and 11 scenarios, if I'm remembering correctly, that are possible that you can play. Maybe it's 12. I'm not quite sure. This is a game where you're just throwing some dice. You're just attacking. You're getting some loot. You're just having a relatively simple, fun time. But this is a game I feel like I can play with a lot of different people. It is not a gateway level game. It is more complex than that. It's more of a midway game. So maybe you can make this make sense as a next step, perhaps, if people have been taking to the Carcassones and the Ticket to Rides of the world fairly well. Maybe you could try to step it up with a game of this weight class. But it's just it's atypical of what I'm looking for because it's not particularly deep. But it is just a lot of nonsense and fun in the best sense of the word nonsense here. I really just don't have great justification as to why I, of all people, like it, but I do. And I might see about picking up some of the expansion stuff for it at some point because I know there's a lot of it out there. So just past the base box, there's plenty for me to potentially pick up. So that is my number 53 Arcadia Quest. My number 52 is Mission Red Planet, which is down 6 spots on my list, so about the same place. Its weight is about a 5, and it will play 3 to 6 players. I think it technically says 2 on the box. And again, this is one of those places where the box lies to you, because I couldn't see this working with 2 players at all. Mission Red Planet is a briefer than it seems area control game that's mostly about the card play. You get 9 different cards. Everyone gets the same 9 different cards, and they're going to fire off in a different sequence depending on who plays what each round. So what it does is it does a countdown. So you go 10, 9, 8, 7, and then everyone who has a 7 at that point flips up their card, and their cards go off. And then you go 6, 5, 4. Everyone has a 4 at that point, flips up their card, and so on, depending on which number you pick. So the ones that are higher numbered go off first. The ones that are lower numbered go off last. So you have to kind of pick, thinking like, is the effect that I want to do with this card going to work if I try to use it? Or is it going to be affected by the other players? There's lots of chaos in this game, and this gets a lot more chaotic as you add more players rather than having less. So you certainly have this sense of like, what kind of game do you want to play? Do you want to play this really chaotic game where lots of crazy stuff happens and it's really hard to predict what's going to work and what's not? Or do you want the more tactical, I think I can get away with this because I know what my other 2 opponents are going to do in like a 3 or a 4 player version of this game? Which kind of game do you want? And I do like that, and I do like that that is an option, and that I can think about that if I want to pull this out. Like, if I have a group of 5 do I want this as a chaotic game, or if I want a group of 3, do I want that really tight tactical game instead? And then all you're doing is you're putting your guys on rockets, and those rockets go to different parts of Mars and onto Mars's moon as well, potentially, depending on which rockets you put them on and which destinations that they have. And then you're going to control and get points based on which parts of of Mars you control, and sort of how you have your guys distributed. That's essentially the game. It's not extremely heavy, but there's more going on than I think you could do. It's more than a gateway game would typically have, so there's that. But maybe this one more so than Arcadia Quest that we just talked about. I think this one, it can work as a next step game where you can say, okay, let's ramp up the difficulty level a little bit now that you guys have sort of gotten some more entry weight games out of the way. So I think for that purpose, it's very good. I think it's just good when I don't want something crushingly complex and I just want a little bit of chaos in my game, and I want the theme, which is cool. I do like the idea of sending people onto Mars and trying to control various territories of Mars. It all works for me. This is a solid all-around game. It's not the deepest strategy game, but there is definitely some tactical elements to playing it that make it enjoyable and rewarding to go back to. So that is my number 52, Mission Red Planet. My number 51 is a small filler game just missing my top 50 by one spot, and that is For Sale, which is up 5 spots from my list last time. Its weight is about a 2-ish, maybe a 1 if I'm feeling generous, and will play easily 3 to 6 players. For Sale is a auction game that has 2 halves. In the first half, you are taking a set amount of money that you have to bid with and bidding for cards. So as long as you're in the auction, you can potentially get something better. So the first person to duck out of the auction, whether it's right at the beginning or later on, they take the lowest card on the table. So sometimes you're like, I would be happy with anything but the lowest 2 cards in like a 5-player game. So you just bid long enough to stay in it that long. And then when you duck out, the thing is you don't get all of your money that you bid back. You have to lose half of it rounded up. So if you bid $7,000, all the denominations are in thousands of dollars, you have to lose 4,000 of that to the box, and so you pay 4,000, you get 3,000 back, but you avoid getting one of the lower cards that you were trying to avoid. If you win, you have to pay the full amount, but you get the highest card out of the whole set. So there's some jostling for like, when's the right time to duck out? At what point am I just delaying the inevitable by continuing to bid when really I should duck out now so that the bid that I lose isn't so much? It's really interesting. And then the second half is like a completely different kind of auction where you've got all these cards in your hand and they're numbered between 1 and 30 with 1 number of each. And you all see a bunch of money cards bid out in the middle of the table, 1 for each player. You put down a card face down, and then you flip them all up when everyone's ready. The highest number out of all the houses that you have in your hand gets the highest money value card. The second highest gets the second highest money card, and so on. So if you get the third one, and the third one's an 8,000, you've got 8,000 for the end of the game. You do that until you've used all of your property cards, all the cards with houses on them, numbered 1 to 30, and then you total up the amount of money you have, plus any cash that you could have bid with in the first half of the game that was left over, you add that to your score. Whoever has the highest number wins. Very simple. I essentially taught you the entire game just by explaining it, but there's a lot of tricky decisions to make about when you want to bid and when to duck out, because usually you don't want to out and out win it, but it's deciding when it's worth it and when you're okay getting stuck with the highest bid. Essentially, that is the game here. And when you want to just do anything you can to avoid the lowest cards, because there might be a massive gap between the bottom 2 cards and the top 3 cards. You might have like a 2, a 5, and then it jumps all the way up to a 19, a 22, and a 29 for the top 3 cards. So it's like, you know what, as long as I don't have as long as I'm not one of the first two people to duck out of the bidding, I'm good. I should be fine here. So lots of situations that come up through just the natural probabilities of the game, through shuffling of cards, that make for interesting bidding situations, and it's just very replayable and fun. This is one of my favorite fillers. If anything, I'm kind of wondering why I have this as low as I do, because I really do like For Sale. But then again, this was the game that I compared to Biblios back in an earlier video, and I'm kind of also surprised that there is as much of a gap between where Biblios lands and where For Sale lands, because I think of them kind of equivalently, where I will play one or the other based more on the number of players than I have than any definitive preference for one over the other. So that is my number 51 and last one of this list of 10 For Sale. So that was my number 51 through 60 on my top 100 board games list. I am so happy that you joined me for this one. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you have any feedback, if you like any of these games in particular, certainly let me know. I'm definitely a fan of them if they're this high on my list, even if they aren't quite inside my top 50. I play a lot of games. If it's anywhere in my top 100, I really like the game, so I can assure you of that. So that is my number 51 through 60. Again, just let me know if you have any comments or anything you want to say to me about any of these games. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.